Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ film festival. Landmark Theaters is hosting a retro replay Pride series in June. The closing film is But I'm a Cheerleader on June 25th. And we are hosting that screening. And I am so absolutely delighted to be speaking to the creator and director of the film, Jamie Babbit. Jamie, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you for keeping But I'm a Cheerleader alive all these years later. And what a
Ab-
gift it is to have this movie keep on keeping on.
Exactly. I'm so happy about this series, but when I saw the list of films and I saw that I'm in Shield, I'm like, yes, 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 thank you so much. Because I adore this film and I know so many people who adore this film as well. So thank you so much for making it and for all your work over the years. But let's just, this is, I believe, the 25th anniversary of But I'm a Cheerleader.
25 years ago, it premiered at the Toronto Film Festival.
Mhm.
And after Toronto, it went to the Sundance Film Festival and it premiered in 2000 of January 2000. And it was an amazing premiere. And there was so much happiness and queer joy and so many young Mormon girls who are lining up in Park City, Utah to see it. And I thought, wow, this movie is really striking a chord with young girls, and it made me excited. And it's been quite a journey.
I would have so have loved to have been there. How did the film come up?
The film came about because I wanted to make a movie about queer joy, and in the 90s there were a lot of kind of dark and depressing movies about being a queer woman. And I, as someone who was in their mid-20s at the time, I just felt a need to tell a kind of gay Clueless. And I was such a huge fan of Amy Heckerling and all of her amazing movies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Clueless. And I wanted to make something like that, but have it be lesbian and have it be femme empowerment, where it's not a butch lesbian on a motorcycle saving the femme at the end. It's a feminine lesbian who uses her cheerleading pom-poms to save her butch girlfriend. So it was basically just my own fantasy, and was excited to make the movie. And what a fabulous cast I got. I mean, to work with Clea Duvall and Natasha Lyonne and Melanie Lynskey and RuPaul, it was kind of a dream. And we all came together and made this low budget movie, and it's just lasted forever.
That's amazing. Did you know most of these cast members?
I didn't. I knew Clea Duvall because I had met her at a coffee shop, and she wanted to be an actress and I wanted to be a director. And so we talked about collaborating together. And I wrote a short film called Sleeping Beauties, and it had played at Sundance in 1997.
Mhm.
And Clea Duvall was the lead of it. And it was a gay fairy tale, and it was about two girls who fall in love, and the backdrop was this fantasy fairy tale thing with like Cinderella tropes and Snow White tropes. And um, so it was also a very like pink feminine world. And when it went to Sundance, I met this producer, Michael Burns, who was basically crossing over from being an investment banker to going into movies. And I said to him, hey, come see my short film. And he went to see the short film at Sundance, and he met Clea, and he was like, wow, I really think Clea's a star. And I said, yeah. And I said, and wouldn't it be cool if you financed a movie and then next year we could be at Sundance in competition and not just a short film? And he was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And I think, as a young filmmaker, you meet a lot of people who say things like that and they actually don't do it. But I was really lucky in that Michael said he would do it, and he actually did it. So we were in pre-production, a couple months after Sundance, just basically casting. And so we always knew Clea was going to be in the film. And then Clea was doing a lot of auditioning at the time. So she would have, a lot of time in line for all these like early 90s TV big movies that she was doing.
Yeah.
Um, and so she knew a lot of these young actors. And so she actually met Natasha and said, oh, you should play my girlfriend in this movie. So Clea ended up getting Natasha. And then Melanie Lynskey had just done Heavenly Creatures, the lesbian Peter Jackson movie. And so I loved her in that. And she had just gotten an agent in LA, and I called her and said, I love your client. And she said, well, she lives in New Zealand. And I said, well, what if we fly her to LA? We'll pay for it, and she can live at one of our houses while we make this movie. I think she would be really great for it. So she was like straight from New Zealand and came to make But I'm a Cheerleader. So I think she made a lot of American friends on the movie, and she's still friends with Clea and Natasha to this day. So yeah, we didn't, none of us, the only people who knew each other were me and Clea, and everyone else was kind of new.
How did you meet RuPaul?
RuPaul submitted himself for the part, and at the time, Ru hadn't really been seen out of drag. He was mostly a pop star who had a really big presence with like a #1 single. But he wasn't really acting at that point, and he certainly wasn't male presenting. Like the public hadn't seen that he was male presenting. And so when he came into the casting office, I had a meeting with him. He came in male presenting, and he said, oh, I think the script is so funny, it's so good. I love the idea of me playing like an ex-gay counselor who's secretly in love with this hot guy. And he said, who's playing the hot guy? And I said, well, the hot guy is being played by Eddie Cibrian. And he said, oh, I know who that is. Oh, I know who that is. So he was excited. And I was thrilled because he's just a legend, and he is a rock star, and he's just a really, really smart, playful, fun, intelligent, amazing actor. So I felt very lucky to have him play Mike.
That's great. So after Toronto, after Sundance, I mean, how did you go about getting distribution?
When we went to the Toronto Film Festival, we had an offer from New Line Cinemas.
Mhm.
So we actually got an offer at Toronto to release the film, which was exciting. And then the financier, Michael Burns, who had been, with me from the very beginning, he decided that he didn't like the offer, and they negotiated and negotiated and negotiated. And Michael's really a creative businessman. And he said, I think I'm actually gonna get into buying a studio and have the first release be But I'm a Cheerleader. So he ended up putting a bunch of investors together, and they bought Lionsgate, and But I'm a Cheerleader is one of the first films that they put out. So I got really lucky in that my original investor ended up owning the studio that put it out. So obviously they had a lot of um, just investment in doing a good release job. So we went to all the gay prides, and we had floats, and we had pom-poms and cheerleaders, and we did all the gay festivals. One of them was Atlanta. And it was so fun to like bring the movie to a queer audience. And I think I noticed when we were screening in the early 2000s that a lot of young people really liked the film. And I think it's, as we've all aged from young people to people in their 50s, it's stayed a cult classic, but then it's also in the last 10 years especially really gotten a whole new generation of kids to climb on board.
Exactly. I was reading early, and I didn't know this, that this was originally rated NC-17.
Mhm.
I didn't know that. And you had to make some cuts.
So originally the movie was rated NC-17, and I was really shocked because in my mind it was a G-rated movie. And I said, can I please speak to the woman who gave me the NC-17, because I'd like to talk to her about what I can do to give it an R rating. And she called me back, and she said, I just want to let you know I really like the film. And I said, okay, well, thank you. Why did you get it in NC-17? And she said, well, honestly, it's really about women. And there's a line in there where it talks about a woman going down on another woman. And I know it's a joke, but it's really inappropriate for women to talk about stuff like that. And also, there is some implied masturbation with Megan, the Natasha Lyonne character, and we really don't want to talk about that with women either. So if you trim those things, then we'll be happy to give you an R. And I was like, well, I just went to the movie theater and I saw the trailer for American Pie, which I think got like a PG-13,
Yeah.
and Jason Biggs is masturbating in an apple pie. So I'm a little concerned about the double standard with men and women. Men are allowed to masturbate, women aren't. I said, also, there's a line in Cheerleader where RuPaul says, "Who wants to go down with me?" And every boy raises his hand. So that's implied oral sex with men. And she said, well, that didn't bother me. It really just bothered me with the women. So I think, at the time there was a lot of sexism at the ratings board and a lot of conservative feelings about women and sexuality. So I think the NC-17 was unwarranted, but I cut back. I think I cut like one 30-second implied masturbation moment and cut out one line where a girl said, "You want to go down on another girl." And all of a sudden I got an R rating. So it's all good.
Is it, the irony is if there were beheadings in the movie or people died violently, it would get a PG-13, which was
Oh,
is
yeah.
it's you talked earlier about the fact that when this came out, a lot of films around that time that had LGBTQ themes were darker. You really wanted to celebrate queer joy. Can you sort of talk more about this, about the fact that this was a film that was very bold for its time and did celebrate queer joy back 25 years ago?
I think, as someone who was in their 20s in the late 90s, I was newly out and very excited about being queer and excited about my life as a queer woman. And I noticed that a lot of the films that were very popular at the time, made by some of my contemporaries, were like Boys Don't Cry, an excellent film, but there's a murder of the queer person. High Art, there's a murder, or there's someone dies. So I was thinking, God, I'm from the Midwest. I wasn't a cheerleader. I was like a theater nerd. But as a femme presenting lesbian who felt like I was an empowered, strong feminist woman, I wanted to see what is the movie about our power and not us being murdered. So I also really love comedy and feel like even though it's really hard to make because you can really fail if it's not funny, um, I was excited about being part of a community that I could laugh at my community and laugh with the community. So all those things were really important to me. And I had read some of the research about the ex-gay conversion camps, Exodus International being the big one at the time. And it was pretty depressing stuff, but it also made me laugh because it was so absurd. And the idea that if you teach boys to chop wood, they'll be less gay, or if you teach a woman to put on makeup, she'll be less of a lesbian, is so insane and ridiculous. And I was like, there's no better way to talk about all of these things, but basically to make a satire and laugh at all of them. So it was truly a way to be subversive and talk about things in a way that would make people enjoy it, but also think like, wow, gender really is a construct. Just because you're more feminine doesn't mean it has anything to do with your sexuality, or just because you're more masculine doesn't make it anything to do with your sexuality. We're all just people and fluid, and gender is a drag.
Okay. Everybody that I knew who was in the LGBT community saw this film 25 years ago, obviously discovered it, on DVD a short time later. But can you talk about the younger generation who are now just seeing the film and what younger audiences might say to you when they're talking to you about their first experience?
I think I've heard a lot of gay men say that it was their first date that they had in high school where they invited some boy over and they watched But I'm a Cheerleader and then they had a great night. And I've heard certainly a lot of gay straight alliances from high schools around the country and frankly around the world talk about how this movie was shown at their gay straight alliance in high school and they really appreciated it. And then I met this really cool teacher who was teaching at a school, an all-girls school in Saudi Arabia. And she said to me, But I'm a Cheerleader is like the most watched movie in the Saudi Arabian women's queer scene. And I was like, wow, that's amazing that it made it there. So I'm thrilled and feel like I really made this movie for young queer women, and I'm excited that they're still watching it today. And I think people resonate with queer joy and they want to laugh and they want to fall in love with each other and they want something that represents how hard our community can be, but how resilient we are and how love in the end wins. And I think that's really the themes of the film.
Exactly. Jamie, you've gone on to have such a spectacular career, film, television. Um, Only Murders in the Building. I have to ask you about A League of Their Own, which was such an extraordinary series. Can you sort of talk about your involvement in that? And that is another series, that is another, project of yours that meant so much to our community.
So I read the script for League of Their Own, written by Abby Jacobson and Will Graham, and I was obviously a fan of Abby Jacobson from Broad City. And I was actually in Provincetown with my queer family, my two daughters, my gay best friend, sperm donor, and my partner. And I read this script and I thought, wow, this is such a cool update to the original film because I loved the original film. And Penny Marshall is definitely one of my idols and directing mentors, although I never met her. But she was certainly in the comedy Hollywood world way before people like me were accepted. But one of the things that always struck me when I watched the movie over and over again, which once again I love, is like I just didn't really believe that Rosie O'Donnell was straight. And when she has that picture of her husband, I was like, really? That doesn't feel truthful. That feels like some Hollywood nonsense. And then there was that weird sequence in the original movie where the black woman like throws the baseball, and I was like, what is this? Like, this is insane. Like, there were so many really famous black players in the 40s who were in the Negro League. And I knew that. I grew up in a black city in Cleveland and knew the history of how many amazing black players there were in the Negro League who had better stats than people in the MLB. And so when I read the script for League of Their Own, I was like, oh, it's so cool because half the script is about the Negro League and how good those players were, and half the script is about the women's MLB players who were, playing on the Peaches. And I just thought it was a very cool, updated, more modern, more inclusive, more actually real telling of the story. And so the first thing I did when I read the script was I went to Cooperstown, New York, where they were having a convention of all the original players, the female players who are in their 90s at this point, and met them. And I would say, half of them were lesbians or trans men, frankly. And I thought, wow, just a different generation and how cool to be able to tell these queer stories. And also wanted to talk about the queer joy because being a famous baseball player in the 40s and a lesbian and on the road and the fans and the other players, I mean, incredible. Those women had the time of their lives.
Oh, that's great. Um, Retro Replay Pride series is playing in 9 cities. Obviously, I'm in Atlanta. And Jamie, Atlanta is a city that obviously you've worked here on and off. Can you sort of talk about your relationship with Atlanta?
I love Atlanta. It reminds me a lot of where I grew up in Cleveland, in that it's just a amazing city with so much history, so much Black history, so much um the whole civil rights history in the way that Ohio is like the end of the Underground Railroad. Atlanta has become really a power center for Black excellence. And I have enjoyed making so many projects in Atlanta. The crew is amazing. The city is every time I go to Atlanta, there's more and more and more and more. And I just feel so lucky that I know the city so well. My current partner is actually one of the producers of Stranger Things, so I really see how incredible that crew is and how many years they've been making Stranger Things in Atlanta. And truly you guys have like the best people out there. um and I've been to Pride in Atlanta and gone to the park, and it really feels like the San Francisco of the South. And it's just an amazing city, and I love it.
What are a couple of the projects you've done here?
Well, I have visited a lot Stranger Things, so I've been there most recently. I did a show called Drop Dead Diva, which we shot in Atlanta, and we also shot in Peachtree City. And there's actually a street called Diva Drive in Peachtree City, which was because we created that street and put asphalt on it so that we had a better street for our trucks to move up and down. So I was years on Drop Dead Diva, which was such a blast to make.
That's great. So final question, again, on the 25th anniversary of this amazing film, what is the legacy of But I'm a Cheerleader?
The legacy of But I'm a Cheerleader is we should all celebrate queer joy, and we should all take the sort of hard trials and tribulations of being gay people and basically make lemonade out of lemons. And I think also But I'm a Cheerleader is reminding us that gender is a drag, and in the end, it doesn't matter whether you're masculine or feminine, or we're all somewhere in this middle ground, and the binary is kind of gone, and it is a celebration of just queer joy.
Thank you so much. But I'm a Cheerleader plays June 25th at the Midtown Art Cinema and various landmarks across the country. Jamie, thank you so much for making this film, and thanks so much for talking to us.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoy the film.
Thanks so much.